right, everyone. So thank you for joining us for this webinar Finance and Climate event. My name is Lucas. I'm the community manager here at College to Climate. And we're very excited to be hosting Breene and River. Breene is the president at Carbon Collective and River is head of partnerships at Atmos Financial. And today we're here to talk about just how finances and climate connect to bridge the world. I'm aware that some of you are studying finance in college. So this is just a great way for you to understand as in how your education can be applied to this field, but also just to have a conversation about financing as a solution to climate. So without further ado, I think I'll let Breene, you can introduce yourself first and then River, and then we can just start out with some questions and then go from there.
Yeah. So my name is Breene Murphy. I'm the president of Carbon Collective Investing. We are a climate-focused investment advisor, and we focus in the public markets, right? So this is like the stock market that you've heard of, or the bond market. You all are sounds like business or finance people, so you'll be pretty familiar with that. We create investment portfolios that are divested from fossil fuels and reinvested in climate solutions. And we started for individuals. And we now focus primarily on businesses and nonprofits. We help them with their 401k and 403b accounts. You all seem like the type that when you get a job, you will know what those things are if you are finance majors. And so that will be a part of it. And then we've also launched two ETFs. One is on fixed income and one is on equities. And both on climate solutions. So that's me. Yeah, I'll pass it over to River.
I'm with Atmos Financial. I'm the head of partnerships, which essentially just means I was employee number 3 and I do a little bit of everything now at Atmos. Our primary focus is cleaning up the banking sector finances. So we have checking savings accounts and 100% of our deposits go towards funding clean energy. So to date, what are the tickers? Caitlin, I'm not sure what a ticker is. So today we have funded over 1,000 solar installations across the country using our bank deposits and have done nothing else. For comparison, your big bank is funding things they may not agree with, and we think that sucks. So we're trying to clean that. So we're trying to clean that up, and then it looks like the questions are already coming in. So yeah, I guess we could go from there. It looks like.
Oh, cool, Jessica. I didn't realize. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can maybe hold on to those questions to the very end. I'll just start with some questions that could be helpful here, and then we can just do the open Q&A. So I guess before jumping into what you both do for a living, since our audience here is mostly early in their careers, could you share with us how you ended up working in climate, and specifically at this intersection between finance and climate?
River, you want to go first since I went first last time?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I stumbled ass backwards into climate. So I was a scuba instructor and they had me teaching conservation underwater, like identification courses. And I was like, I've seen Nat Geo. I could definitely do that. And then so I went in to study communications to figure out how to do that more effectively. From there, I went into nonprofits to help with their storytelling, to be like, hey, a lot of people end up in nonprofits because they want to do good, not sure what to do with that. And then I got a master's degree in conservation biology, specifically around accessibility. So how do we get people who are disabled in conservation projects, because I'm deaf and biased. And then my nonprofit was being onboarded to be partners with Atmos Financial. And I was like, hey guys, your marketing and customer service sucks a big one. Can I fix it for you? And that's how I ended up in this sector, is a lot of just like taking a chance, saying what you think, seeing inequities, calling it out, and then doing everything you can to fix it. Breene.
Yeah. I always forget about the scuba instructor part at the beginning. Yeah. So I've always, I mean, you all mentioned, like, you saw me surfing at Climate Week. I've been around the water my whole life, and so I was fairly attuned to both the changes and the science as well. So I never really had a climate epiphany. My epiphany was like more along the lines of like I wanted to do something that was meaningful. My grandmother was really influential in my family. She was like the joke I always tell people is she was the world's smallest nuclear reactor. Um, and like I literally thought she was going to outlive me. And she's my grandmother. Like I thought she was going to daughter on into her 140s and just be happy as a clam and like that would be her. But when she passed away, I'd seen like I got to really look at her life's work. She was the mayor of her town. She was on the LA City Planning Commission. She raised a bunch of money for like scientific like breakthroughs and solutions. And so the people that showed up were just like really touched by what had happened in her, like from her work in her life. And I looked around what I was doing and wasn't much. Um, and so I was like, okay, I should probably start doing something. And that was when I looked around. I was like, okay, well, climate change is the biggest thing happening all across the world. It's happened to everybody, and not nearly enough is being done about it. And even now, like we're doing way more. It's very impressive, but we're still not kind of on escape velocity. So I was like, I'm going to go to climate. Um, I I didn't know where to start really, so I just was like, okay, I'm terrible at everything, so I'll go volunteer at stuff. And that meant I researched places to volunteer. I got really interested in this organization called Citizens Climate Lobby that had an elegant solution and then a very humane approach to incorporating volunteers. And so it's like a carbon fee and dividends, basically pricing in an externality for all of you economics majors around like a carbon price and then giving that money back to everybody else. It's like, hey, this thing is making your life way worse. So we're going to make them pay you back for how much it's making your life worse. And I thought that was like pretty smart. And then I started meeting, like getting involved, meeting with, elected representatives. I'd fly to DC on my vacation, which is a weird thing to do because even though DC is really fun, it's an incredibly frustrating way to spend your vacation um, because not enough climate action is happening. I developed like a real comfort with it. At the same time, I also was trying to not hate my job. And I was in advertising working with my parents. So working with my dad was probably part of why I hated my job. I love him. I just don't like working with him. Um, and I found behavioral economics. And so that was like my path right into finance. And I kind of started like I kept going down these roads of finance and like climate activism, climate volunteering and advocacy. And I started to get like a lot better at 'em as I, developed those skills, my network, kind of revolved around it. I try to do stuff at my work. I try to do stuff, multiple times. And it led me to this place where all of a sudden I was meeting the right people, helping them, and got to this place where someone was like, you need to understand climate finance and marketing. You should talk to Breene. And so they reached out and talked to me. And so that was how I met Zach and James at Carbon Collective. And it was so fun because I was like, this is something that could change fiduciary investing, forever. Like it has the underpinnings to reshape the industry. And so for me, that was what was exciting.
Gotcha. And I love how both of you started in, you know, oceans, rivers,
Yeah.
scuba diving and marine surfing.
Yeah. She's
And
underwater. I'm on top of the water. Yeah.
that's a good way to put it, yeah. And it just looks like, from what I could hear, it wasn't like a straight path from where you were to climate. And I think that's a message that we get across a lot as students, that there's no like one route, one path you take to arrive to working at our organization climate. Um, And that's both like a challenge for like students like us, that we're like, we want to make that impact. We just don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
So I think it's really helpful, and thank you for sharing that. Uh, my next question is more towards the issue at hand that I see that both of you are trying to tackle from different angles, which is, how exactly is like personal finance fitting into climate change? What's like the problem that uh, we can see from this side of the perspective?
Yeah. I mean, River, do you want me to go first again? Since are we doing alternating?
Yes.
Um, okay, so climate finance. Oh, that's kind of funny. I added that little. I'll get that back. Um, Solving climate change is not a technological issue. We have the technology we need to solve the vast majority of it. I mean, there might be parts of it that we need, but this is something we can do. And so when you look at that, then it becomes a question of human will. And there's like a handful of ways in which there's large levers for human will, but a couple of them are like government and policy is a way. You have like culture, like how people behave and choose things. Another one would be like money in the markets, right? So if you have this huge lever that not a lot of people were doing much about, right? Like even Vanguard, they launched their ESG fund, right? Like that's just a divested fund. It's not invested in the important stuff. And so when you look at it, and a really good organization to look at these numbers is Bloomberg NEF, or someone I like to follow is Nat Bullard. Um, but we're following around this trend of like we need to be investing between $5 and $9 trillion every year. And we were 1.8 last year. It looks like we'll get to 2 trillion this year. And so if we know that, we have to radically ramp up. It's like, how do we actually ramp this all up? So we went to the consumer and like employee approach, um, and wanted to help people just like with a simple, effective way to invest that would be aligned with solving climate change. And I think that some of the big parts about it is the stories we get to tell. Is because right now we are small. Like we're not Vanguard that's like brushing past $10 trillion. And so I don't want to pretend like we are, but I do think we have the underpinnings to do that. And the story that we're telling, I think, is one that can help propel us there and play our little role in, uh, making sure the incentives for solving climate change are changed.
Yeah, Atmos came at it from kind of a different perspective in that we were getting asked all the time of like, what can I do right now? What can I do right now to fix things? And big banks have invested almost $7 trillion into fossil fuels. They're like, okay, right there. That's all you do is you just take away that 7 trillion and you've done something by paying your rent. So we took how can we mobilize people with an everyday action, and then scale it to rapidly transition the economy. Finance is both a systemic and a personal problem, and it takes people coming at it from both ends to overhaul a system so that it can be doing good things, because it can be doing good things, as we see what Carbon Collective is doing, what Atmos is doing, what Amalgamated is doing, what all these other financial institutions. The framework is there, so everyone could be doing it. It's just incentivizing it, like Breene was kind of saying, that how do you motivate people to make the right decision, and you show them that it's approachable, it's easy, and it is financially beneficial to them too. You don't have to suffer in any part of your financial life by making the environmental choice. It can be a benefit to you and the climate.
Yeah.
I'm a customer.
Vice versa. That's our 401k also is Breene.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm also a customer.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm getting the message that we just have this gap, and I see that like you said, River, like one is not all just like the business money, but also just like us, like the consumers, everyday people that want to make a change and doing like supporting ourselves financially, but also having that impact. And actually connected to this, my next question is actually, so you both have these solutions and you know more than anyone else because you're working on it every day. What are like some of the challenges that you see from having these climate-focused financial products or like these green bonds? What are some unique challenges that are in this industry?
Okay, that sounded directed at me, but
Yeah, ours is easy, right? We're just battling against Chase and Wells Fargo, and those are monsters of organizations. So that's our it's a Goliath versus the other guy whose name I can't remember right now. David, thank you. That's our struggle is 7 trillion versus a fintech is that major hurdle for financial goodness. It just because it's a novel concept. So we're coming at it fresh, essentially. But the green bonds is a whole other ballgame.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say what Riverside is like also an issue. We have like the Vanguards and the BlackRocks, and we are new as well. Um, I'll dive into some like more specific things, which are the United States hasn't done a very good job of financially like educating people financially, and so as a result, it oftentimes people are really uncomfortable with doing something with their money. So I think that that's one thing that I see a lot of is just a discomfort. I don't know how to move my money, time block it. They want to push it away for later. So yeah, so that's something, and that even affects when we're talking to businesses because we're talking to their chief people officers or founders, and even founders are not always comfortable with these types of decisions. So financial literacy is one. I think that's probably the biggest one I face, to be honest. We also have the David and Goliath approach. Um, we have a couple other things, which is like we can't afford to charge the same fees as a Vanguard yet. We aspire to. But they have I mean, they have, trillions and trillions of dollars in assets under management, so they can charge for like really low expense ratios. Um, we also have the fact that um, just getting the right products is a challenge, and there's like little individual things that come into launching something. So like we have two ETFs, which we put into our portfolios, and that's great. It's a good place for distribution. Um, but those ETFs existing does not mean that other financial advisors are going to use them until we get bigger. So we have to hit these like thresholds where once we hit a certain threshold, and River, I'm sure there's something like this in banking where it's like, as soon as you hit a certain size, more people will be open to working with you. But we have that much of it's like a stepping stone approach where you have to scale from the bottom up to the top. It's really hard to go top down. And so we're in this place where we're trying to, but I mean, the good side of that is like we get to understand our path and people are uncomfortable with finances, so they're willing to be educated. And the Vanguards, all that, they're kind of lazy and not doing what we do. So there's actually a lot of opportunity too. But it does take knowing what like the specifics of the challenge are.
Do you think the lack of education is intentional, or you think it's just a product of like no one's focusing on it right now?
I think it's no one's focusing on it. Like like when I look at the United States, it's like we have these piecemeal approaches to a lot of issues, but like financial education isn't in schools, right? No one not in any forced manner. Like we're not teaching art students like how to, make sure that they have enough for retirement. And yet that's the system in which they're living, where they have enough social security to not lose everything, but they're going to be poor unless they save up for retirement. Like you need to save money to take care of yourself in retirement. And I don't think people understand that. And I don't even think employers understand that because they're also not paying people in a way that allows them to save for retirement. Because the number one reason why people don't save for retirement is because they can't afford it. So we don't have a very good system. It's not a system we've thought a lot about. And because we had not thought a lot about, we haven't thought about the solutions too. So my gut is that we have all these issues and then we just forget about it.
Yeah.
Because like I know a lot of teachers that care a lot, but like my kids are in school and they're teaching math, they're teaching writing, they're teaching social skills, and like all of this is really good, but it's not like how do I survive in the wilderness of adulthood and inside the confines of uh you know of my country. So I just maybe there's some malfeasance. I mean, you can find that a lot, but um, I think in general, it's just decades of people not having the education, so forgetting that it's even important to educate on something that they don't even know.
Yeah. We're
Yeah,
seeing,
and Caitlin's right. There are laws being passed now. There's like 13 states.
We're seeing a really unique thing happening really in the last like 2 years, in which social media is really filling that role of education for us in like long form, like YouTube videos. Are people are going to like Hank Green, right?
Yeah.
He could teach you psychology, but he's also teaching like financial literacy, and people are coming out of it very well equipped to understand their finances. And I don't think ever in history have we, like, I'm thinking from like when I was a kid, a magazine wasn't going to teach you how to be financially literate. Like there was no responsibility to public figures in doing so. But we're really seeing a drive of public figures taking up that role of like, oh, I'm seeing this missing piece and I'm going to fill it. So we're seeing like a more communal aspect to this education of it being picked up rather than it's the responsibility of teachers and parents. And we're saying, actually, we have access literally the whole world at my fingertips. Let's do that. And it's been a very exciting time because we're seeing a unique customer coming through now, where historically a banking customer doesn't come in until they're, in their 30s. Prior to that, they're just banking where their parents were at. And now we're seeing people 18 be like, I'm trying to get myself financially set up because I was educated by this public figure. So it's been a really, I think, exciting time for education where it has been lacking, but people are starting to pick it up on a
Yeah.
personal responsibility.
Absolutely. And as students, I think we can relate a lot to that. No financial, at least my experience been that what you describe. And it's like you were reading my mind because my next question, and I'll just warn everyone else. This is my last question, so please prepare other questions because I know we have way more brilliant questions coming up. Uh, which is so how can like students like right now without much like capital start to think using finance as a tool for positive climate action? And noting that uh, I know you mentioned financial education already, but taking into account that we don't have that let's say that structure, financial structure set out yet, what's our role? How can we promote this? Whether it be just like in climate, but also just bridging that gap. What do you think?
I think Breene kind of touched on this, but people are uncomfortable making decisions or talking about their money. And I think making money a comfortable conversation to have makes it, you can't hide bad behavior if it's out in the open. So we're seeing big banks make bad behaviors because they've been getting away with it. No one's talking about it. No one wants to look at the money. But if we're just like really open about it, of like, oh, hey, I opened a new bank account, they're doing this thing. If like money is a normal conversation, just like if you talk about like, hey, I had a gnarly cold over the weekend, right? It's just like a fact of life. Money is a fact of life. If we do that kind of conversational normalizing, it will go leaps and bounds. So you don't have to talk about like, I'm out of money, but you could talk about like financial motivators of like, oh, I decided to open up a 401k, and that being something you talk about instead of being like, that's boring. I don't really want to talk about money because that's a hard subject. I don't know how it's going to make someone else feel. La, la, la. There's like lots of variables at hand. But I think normalizing that conversation makes a big difference. I often people ask me, what do you do for work? And I'll be like, oh, I work at an environmental checking and savings, blah blah blah. And they'll be like, oh, I know, I'm supposed to change, but I'm still with Wells Fargo. And every single time we have that conversation, I'm like, yeah, that's great that you are aware of the behavior so you can advocate internally. You don't have to be at Atmos, but at Wells Fargo, you could be saying like, hey, don't invest my money here. I do want you to invest it here, and you can drive internal change. And people being aware of that being a need, it makes a big difference. So, I mean, of course, I think you should bank in 401k and all of your financials should be climate aligned, but it's not always feasible. So just having the conversation, just like we talked politics, right? Your responsibility is to talk about it. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add to that is on the simplest level, like money is one of the best ways to facilitate human collaboration, right? Like if you are young people, you're probably worried about where if you were like, I won't project. When I was your age, I was really worried about who was going to pay me money to do work, right? And these people are strangers to you now, but will be people that you work closely with. That's kind of amazing that something like money is able to help bring to totally different people who have never met before into a room so you can chat about, and so you can work on things together. And so I think if you're going to do anything hard, anything that scales, you have to understand money in some way, like how you spend on people or on resources. You're gonna like, I mean, even if you're running a government or if you want to be a poet, it doesn't matter. Like you're going to need to understand that you are not in a vacuum and that money is part of that connective tissue. It's not all of it, but it's part of it, and it can really help you accelerate if especially if you're looking at solving climate change. There's some like really simple, direct ones like we need to invest and finance way more climate solutions. But there's also other things of like, I'm trying to do this hard thing, and I know that I need to get my worth or I need to pay somebody their worth so that we can do it. And just understanding that it has that capacity is, I think it makes it something, one of the more special things that humans have. If at times boring and tedious and uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I
no.
like, but I like the nerdy stuff.
Yeah, no, really like that. And I'll just defer to anyone who has Q&A. Uh, Feel free just to unmute and go ahead and ask your question, or also if you want to type it, whatever feels most comfortable. And it can be anything about what was discussed or other questions. We're just having here for an open discussion.
Mhm. I do have one thing to say before we like go into this, and this is just like, again, my mistakes in life. But um, when I was in college, I was thinking about how can somebody give me money, right? And to do stuff. And what I've come to find out in the working world, it's so much of it is like, how can I help someone? Because so many people are struggling with things. They're trying to, River, myself, we're struggling to grow businesses. We're doing well, but like we got big stuff we're trying to do. So how can we actually do it? And that mindset shift of like, how can I help people deeply was something that was probably the single most important learning I had of becoming an adult. Not how can people help me, but how can I help others? So hopefully you don't have to learn that and go through, almost a decade of being, uh, you know, painfully despondent like I was. But I, uh, in case you are in that place, hopefully that, accelerates you out of it in some way.
How can I help others? That's nice. Um,
What are they struggling with?
how
Right?
can I solve their pain points as is?
Yeah. As
Can
soon as
I
you ask yourself that question, so much opens up. So
Yeah, Aaron, go ahead.
sorry, can you guys hear me, or is the background music okay?
Yeah, can hear you.
Yeah, I'm Aaron. I'm a fresh graduate from UCLA, who majored in business economics, and I'm also really passionate about like using finance to kind of create an impact, be it the sustainability side or the social side. And when I heard about your guys' startups, it kind of reminded me of like a SoFi, although they are more on like the social side. And when you guys talked about like size and reaching different hurdles, I was wondering like what's the next big milestone that you guys have in each of your guys' companies and organizations.
yeah. River, you want to go first? You look like you got like the smirk.
I mean, I'm not pandering here, but one of our biggest milestones was because of like a college age demographic. Essentially, we just like got with some climate communicators, got the word out about Atmos, and we were just hit with every single climate oriented college kid, and it immediately scaled our capacity to give out money for green energy, because we matched up with an effective communicator who targeted a pain point, right? He essentially was like talking about how he pissed everybody off. He was like, this is what banks are doing with your money. Did that make you really mad? Here's a solution. And then everyone was like, heck yeah, this is what I've been looking for. We had a whole flood of people who are like-minded. And then because of that, we built, hundreds of solar panels on houses, all because of an effective communication campaign. So that's been a big point. Like we've talked about, education is so critical. And it is, because as soon as people are educated, they take action immediately. We have found every single time. Like the biggest uh prohibition, I don't, the thing that prevents
Blocker.
people, thank you, blocker from switching is a lack of knowledge. As soon as we have access to the knowledge, we've got massive uptake on it. So that has been a big scale moment for us, is like figuring out the sweet ingredient that educated in mass.
Yeah, that's great. For me, like, so right now, size really matters for us. So the bigger we get, the better. So we're at about $155 million in assets under management, right? In the investing world, that's like not that big. It's big enough for like we're a real company and everything is pretty exciting. But right now, what I'm kind of looking at is like these nonprofits, these really sustainable small businesses that care a lot, that do a lot of like great reporting, climate tech startups. Like, how can I get more adoption there, especially in the nonprofits? Because a lot of them have like legacy old dollar amounts that would be really helpful. So it's like the Nature Conservancy has $110 million invested in fossil fuels because they have like a $1.2 billion 401k, right? I don't think they want that, right? Like they've divested in their endowment, they've done all that work. Like I don't think they want that. And so I'm really working on like how do I go there, or Patagonia, right? Like they probably have like 30 million bucks invested in fossil fuels because, they're in the classic Vanguard structure. I don't think they want it either, right? So it's like these places, the Sierra Clubs, the Earth Justices, like Earth Justice is literally their job is to sue oil companies, right? You don't want to be suing your investments to be a good investor. That's just like that doesn't make sense. So it's like I'm looking to get more of those companies and really create like a robust foundation so that when we do try to do harder things, we'll have like again like a strong place. So I'm kind of targeting roughly getting to $1 billion in assets under management. That allows us to unlock and do more ETFs that will make our portfolios better. Shareholder advocacy we'll start to do. So it's just like more ways to invest and probably like I'm really excited for the day we start doing shareholder engagement. Like that to me is very exciting. So that $1 billion threshold is like where I'm looking at. So if you go to a company and you want a 401k, like please come back and talk to me. Like I love talking to these organizations, but that is where I'm focused right now.
I like how you mentioned about these like and like how they have their investments in indirectly fueling or sorry, financing those fossil fuels.
Yeah.
It reminds me how a lot of our actions unintentionally are also supporting causes that we might not personally support. And so
Yeah.
it's again what you both mentioned about having these conversations, bringing these topics up and just talking about it is like how we get the change started. And
Mhm.
I saw,
Zachary's question, I think, is
yeah,
part of it. Um, so Zachary had a question around like the investment performance around, green being like there's a discount or you don't get as good a performance. And what I'd say is that's um, kind of true, but mostly false. And the way it's kind of true is that oil was the only thing that performed well in 2022. You may remember that Russia invaded Ukraine. It decreased the supply while keeping the same amount of demand. So oil did really well then. Um, but if you look back 10 years, oil's like 1% annualized return compared to the S&P 500, which is like 10%. So it's clearly a drag on on your portfolio. And that's backwards. On a forwards looking basis, um, the oil industries, they came out and so right now we're doing like 100 billion barrels and change a day. And oil companies are like, what are you going to do in 2050? And this is the rosiest guess, by the way. They're like 100 billion barrels and change. I think we're going to be roughly flat on oil demand over the next 30 years. 25 years. That's a shit investment, right? Pardon me, this is recorded. That's a terrible investment. So like if you're looking at that from a business standpoint, it's like it hasn't been good for the last 10. Had one good year in 2022. Do I think that's cyclical or do I think that's a long-term trend? We think it's cyclical because as we're looking forward, we're projecting no significant growth in the oil industry. And so as a result is like we're thinking over the timelines in which all of us will be investing. Because even though I'm really old to you all, I'm not that old. I'm only 41. So I'm like, I know River, you're River, like I'm really old. She's like, when are you gonna retire? I have a long time before I retire. I have like 25, 30 years before I do that. And so it's like if I'm looking over my time horizon, it's like, do I want to be invested in oil over that timeline? Like I just think it's a bad idea. So that's my way of like most honestly answering it. Like there has been a year in which that is very much true, but it hasn't been the trend on a longer time horizon and is unlikely to change around.
I had a question about just clarifying. So you mentioned that so if a company has their 401ks in Vanguards, for example, and those are invested in companies like fossil fuel companies.
Yeah.
From a carbon
Everything.
accounting,
Vanguard's and everything, but yes, keep going.
yeah. From a carbon accounting standpoint, does that fall on the company or the person who actually owns those stocks?
That is such a there's no conclusive answer right now, is what I'd say. Um, it does it does fall into that scope 3 section 15 is where I see it bucketed the most. And so it's kind of in that like what do my employees do? Kind of like mindset, but it is like the investments of the company. So that's why I'd say yeah. So I haven't seen anyone seriously tackle it on the investing side. I've never heard of anyone measuring their 401k emissions before. I have heard of people doing the banking stuff though. I don't know, like River, you might be able to answer the banking like much better than I.
I think the answer is pretty similar in the banking of like nobody knows because it's a fresh concept of like truly tracking your impact down to every end of every avenue. We like to say it's the big banks who's holding it, but that's bias. I'm not sure how to answer that correctly without bias.
And I guess a follow-up to that question. So for the companies and I guess for Breene, like the stocks that you or I know you have different plans depending how much risk you're willing to take.
Mhm.
But also just choosing which companies to invest money. What criteria do you use to determine what those are?
Yeah. So I think the first start is like is what passive investing is. Because passive investing is basically just holding all the stocks, small shares of all the stocks in the market, right? And then it's allocated to what you're going to do. It's like index based. So what we do is we take like passive investing and we cut out sectors. Like the energy sector, it would be logical to think that it would include renewables, but it does not. Um, Renewables are in technology in the sectors. I swear, River, like I know you gave me that face, but like I'm telling the truth. Um, but so it's all fossil fuels in the energy sector. So if you take like, so there's a way in which we can take out those sectors on an ETF basis and still keep passive investments. That means, this is like nothing fancy. This is like all the healthcare companies. This is like we do actually cut out the big banks with like a regional passive finance holding. But it's like we do these sectors and then we created our own ETF on the equity side. So these are climate solution stocks. And this is where like most people like to dig in. It's only about 19% of our equity portfolios. But the thing that's valuable about it is it's all the companies building building climate solutions and earning more than 50% of revenue from that climate solution. Because there are companies out there that are building climate solutions, but it's like 4% of their revenue. So there's things like that. And then we are going to a place in which we're doing much more green bonds. We have 2 green bond funds and some US Treasuries, which we'll probably have to address treasuries in some form or the other, like at one point, because my gut is that the US will have a high emissions per $1 million invested, in their treasury. So, but that's what we have for today.
Yeah, and I guess for Atmos River, I know there's like a donation system too, and there are I know that because I mentioned I do have an account with both of you, and I know when you donate, you get like a savings increase. So for those organizations, what criteria did you choose for those? Did your team choose for those? And maybe you can explain to everyone what I'm talking about, maybe.
Yeah. So essentially, Atmos offers a high yield savings account, and we give that to you not based off of your account balance, but based off of are you donating to a climate nonprofit as an equity solution? Because a lot of banks will give you a higher return if you have more money in there. And we decided, no, are you going to do good behaviors? We're going to reward that instead. And we work with 150 nonprofits, and all of them have some sort of climate lens to them, but we have a very broad scope of what a climate lens means because climate is impacting every facet of life. So we have nonprofits addressing housing crises because as climate drives people out of their homes, like we're seeing in North Carolina, people need somewhere to go, and housing then becomes a climate issue. We have people working on food security as the climate changes and regional crops become unsustainable in regions. Food becomes a climate crisis, and the list goes on and on. So essentially, we work with organizations who are in recognition that their work will benefit those suffering from the climate crisis or prevent furthering of the climate crisis. And that is, all ethics based instead of financially based. And part of the motivator to that was we can build the solar, but if there's no one on the ground training new solar installers, it means nothing. So we need like nonprofits, we need boots on the ground to facilitate the rapid uptake of electrification. So that was the kind of the selfish motivator behind that giving.
Yeah. Aaron, do you want to read that or?
Yeah, sure. I know it sounds a little confusing, but I was just thinking about what the difference is between starting your own bank as compared to like starting a fund that Vanguard, who has all the clients, like they own all the 401ks, like Vanguard and like BlackRock can invest in.
Fidelity,
Like what's kind of
yeah.
difference? Yeah.
So I think that
Or
directed at
It could
me.
be answered from either of us, really.
Yeah.
River, you go
Yeah.
first, and then I can like.
From the banking side, Atmos is a fintech. So we're not a bank ourselves. So we kind of sidestepped the need to be competitive with other banks by instead making it an opportunity for banks to align themselves with the values the majority of their customers hold. So we work with financial institutions to clean up their deposits. So for example, our banking partner is Five Star Bank out of New York. And they do all the banky stuff, like they provide us with FDIC insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And in turn, we hold all of the contracts for the loans, but they are also facilitating that. So their portfolio is moving towards investing in electrification rather than the real estate they were primarily invested in, and they didn't have to do the build to transition to that. Like they don't have to do the hard uptake to find solar installers, to deploy the loans, to do all the managing of the loans, blah, blah, blah. We hold all of that responsibility. In turn, they do what they do best, which is banking. So we don't have the same struggles. We're not competitors with the big banks. We are an opportunity for the big banks to clean up their act.
Yeah.
gotcha.
I'd say.
Does that mean that? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask if like you see like a Wells Fargo as a potential partner as well.
Yeah, if there was no need for Atmos because every financial institution had cleaned up their finances, that'd be fantastic. I don't know if you should tell my bosses I said that, but I would love if we were out of business because of, sorry. My kid's school is calling me. I apologize. Yeah, essentially we would love to be put out of business because every bank was a environmentally motivated bank and there was no need for us.
Yeah. So what I'd just share is it depends, like when you're looking at it from an individual side, like your banking is for typically like short-term cash, right? I'm gonna need this soon or soonish, right? I'm saving for something. Investments have a different time horizon, and so you're looking at, I mean, like my investments have like a 30-year time horizon, you know? So that's where I'm at. So I think that understanding your individual's needs is thing one. That's pretty different. Um, I think thing two is, you know, when you're in banking, it's like once you like at banks, you go like you put your money there, and then those banks lend the money out, right? And so like River is like helping them think about like how do they have like, you know, good loan policies for who they work with. Like whereas for me, we have to create these diversified portfolios, and so we're like we're like bo- both keeping what we call the low carbon economy. This is like Costco, right? Like Costco could have a business in a world in which we've decarbonized, um, but we're augmenting that with like investments into climate solutions that are overweighted. So this is like the solar, wind, electric vehicles, batteries, water irrigation efficiency, dynamic glass, like all the project drawdown solutions. So that's like that ends up, and then we have to put it in the right risk profile for the people. Like, so we have to be really aware of the risk profile of the individuals. Um, I think in both scenarios, we have like a lot of understanding of even the people who are like quote unquote the people that we want to change. Like the finance system is so intertwined, you end up having to deal with a lot of them anyways. So for example, we manage plans on the Vanguard software, and it's like one of our better softwares, right? But we can divest a lot of the Vanguard funds from the Vanguard software. Kind of like a pickle, right? Um, you know, and or an opportunity. It's just like there's some weirdness that comes with being in the financial services industry that is very much like that. And so I don't know. So it's very different. I think over time I see how connective everything is in the financial services industry, right? Like your bank deposits become loans. Those loans get big enough, they get securitized. When they get securitized, they can become bonds. When there's enough of those bonds, like people can put them in their ETFs. When they're in the ETFs, they can go in in an investment portfolio. So it's like everything has like this connective tissue to it, so even though it's very different on what like our customer needs are, and even the institutions that we are both against and work with, I think there's like I don't know. I've always felt like they're compatriots. You know, it's like oh, go talk to Atmos. It's kind of like a sister organization for us.
No, great question, and thanks for answering it. And I think we are right about time for any closing remarks because I feel like a lot of wisdom was shared tonight, everywhere from like understanding the climate, like the problem from climate perspective, but also just financial literacy for us just starting out. So I guess River and Breene, any say like any words of wisdom you want to share just for us, and anything that was left that we didn't mention maybe?
I think Caitlin's question is maybe, I'm going to be biased here, a great place to end on for me, because coming from a background from accessibility, education pieces are almost exclusively targeted at wealthy, white, middle-aged people, and that is not sustainable. That is not representative of the people utilizing the system. At Atmos, we take a big focus on accessibility as uptake in education. So we have like very stringent ADA compliance Mostly because I am deaf. So everything at Atmos is like goes through a rigorous review. So how are we ensuring those communication endeavors are hitting people who are almost exclusively left out of both financial and climate solutions? And so that's a big element for us. And the release of the greenhouse gas reduction fund. So the market is about to be flooded with money for low income communities to get access to electrification projects. That is a major focus of Atmos. That is our number one priority moving forward is how are we utilizing our loans in LIDAC low income communities that are very frequently minority as well. So that is ingrained into our ethos of solution now is not only the education piece, how are we making it available, but how are we deploying our solutions into those communities as well. And the release of these funds has made it possible for that on a nationwide scale. And that's all, that's my pitch. That's my ending pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll hit Jessica's question in the end. Just give you all a few resources. So I think Zach's new newsletter at Carbon Collective is really good. I edit it, so I have the good fortune of like reading it up front and thinking about how the investments work. So I always do that. But I mean, Bloomberg Green is amazing. You know, they have like Zara Hergy is great. You have Akshat Rathi is amazing. So there's places like that. You have Sophie Pradam at CTVC. You know, if you want to follow in like the climate tech area, there's just like a lot there. A podcast I like is Clean Techies with Somal Agrawal. I think that one's good. But I guess the last thing I would say is like I kind of started out with this like one thing of helping other people. The other thing I wanted to share is like climate is like a pretty unique community in which people you can reach out to them and they're most likely to chat. If you're looking for your next job, there's a great resource which is Open Door Climate. And you opendoorclimate.com, you can go to it. These are all people that agreed to talk to people if they have any questions. And so I think that's really good. And if I was going to have you do one other thing, there's a book called Designing Your Life. And that book is really like you all are at the start of your careers, right? But understanding what really matters to you, like really matters to you, like what you're good at, you know, what's really available. I think having a framework for that can help you live like a really rich life, which is important as we're trying to do something that's going to take decades and decades to fix. And so we're going to need you to be as like in good shape, taking care of yourself, like doing the work that you really want to do with the right people. So go figure that out, and then you know we can help you with the banking and investing later.
I love that. Yeah, well, just want to thank you, Breene and River, for your time here. Uh, we will share this with our community. I think this is an insane amount of good knowledge regarding this topic, and just happy to keep in touch. I encourage everyone here, if you want to, maybe if you're open to it, both of you to connect on LinkedIn and just
Yeah, I'm here.
kind of just keep in touch. And thank you again. Thank you all for coming in. Yeah, have a good night or good afternoon, depending where you're at.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Thank you both so much.